Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Oracles of Theleston, Episode 9, One of Your Poor Decisions in Life. So that's specifically referencing one of the lines early on in the Fireside 26, I believe, where they talk about magic. We learn a lot about magic, what it is to become a magician or a wizard or a somebody involved with that realm of powers and things. And there was a lot to learn about that. It's actually kind of a longer episode. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes, though. It's about 40 minutes in when they finally get into the meat of the discussion. So, everybody, great to have you here. Dig, Zero, Pull. If any of you want to start with a launching off point, or if there's anything you want to say, go right ahead.
Oh, not to launch off, but it'll come up eventually. Yeah.
All right.
Hi,
All right.
everybody.
It's the devil's
for
work
joining us.
here.
I'll just say that it just cracks me up every time I heard it on the stream or I read it. And thank you so much for using it as the title. But one of your poorer decisions in life was just a really classic comment for that live stream, that fireside. Kind of sets the tone.
Yeah. And yet it's also uplifting knowing I could always make worse choices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
It's like
So,
life can always get worse.
yeah, well, I mean, this is one that can kind of start you down that road too. So, one bad decision leads to another. So, magic is not necessarily a cut and dry sort of thing in Tellison. It's not the sort of game where you're on character create and you can pick a fighter, a rogue, or a wizard. It's not that kind of game. Getting access to magic is not only a very long and difficult process most of the time, but it comes with a lot of sacrifice. It comes with a lot of personal loss, either to sanity or other things, as well as the time you actually dedicate to learning that craft. Uh, and it just has so many different facets and so many different ways that people can get into it in ways that maybe relatively don't harm them that much, but there's not that much they can do with it. All the way to the point of one that we had talked about. I think it was actually on one of the firesides a few weeks ago about sacrificing a whale to bring an entire ship through Enemy's realm or through like the magic ley lines, and random ship in a desert stories and stuff could come out of that. So, and I would think that might be a worse decision, but maybe not. Depends what you're trying to do with that ship.
Well, I was going to say it depends on what you're trying to do in any case, because the magic, well, I had 21, 22 alts lined up.
You're on
and-
22 working,
Yeah,
push
and
towards
wh-
one.
Yeah. One of them was specifically trying to go insane as quickly as possible. So,
Eating mushrooms.
and doing that through the use of magic. So it depends on what your goal is. If you see insanity as a boon, then, using magic to become insane might be the best choice.
At least you're going to have a hell of a ride on the way there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
well,
depends on what your outlook is.
but at the same time, it has to be something where the way that you're approaching it and the way that you're just throwing yourself at it actually gets you to that goal. You might end up pursuing a path where it's like, okay, I know this type of magic is destructive and it drives people mad, but you just can't seem to control it or do anything with it. And maybe you go kind of mad from, the constant failure, but you'd have gone way more crazy if you actually made that thing happen. Uh, but
If I'm chaotic, then I wouldn't care.
that's true.
If I'm
So-
orderly and I want a methodical way of going insane, then yeah, not following, the path that I want it is going to be problematic. But if I'm chaotic, that might not be a problem.
Yeah.
And again, magic is probably going to be fairly chaotic if I pursue it. If I really focus on pursuing magic.
Yeah. one of the examples they give is somebody who's trying to learn about fire. You might be able to get that gift from Nodens that, Nodens can control a few things, has power over a few things, but they specifically give you fire. Not lightning, not any of the other cool stuff, just fire. And, to use in a metered, measured, and controlled way. Versus Thuga is just like, hey, you want to light yourself on fire? You want to light everything else? Go right ahead. Here's the gift.
Yeah.
Go nuts. Incinerate yourself
Yep.
many times.
Yep.
So that seems probably more the route that you would go. And then
Yeah.
I guess my question with that is, you wouldn't necessarily be able to find a temple or cathedral or monastery for Thuga in Sky Pass, would you? I don't remember if they were
Well-
one of the...
Well, not out in the open for sure.
Nah. So it
Yeah.
might be something you'd need to, do a little research and getting into some other spaces before you're finally able to even gain access. Not only even gain access to that type of power, but even gain access to the knowledge that will lead you to the understanding that Thuga is the one that you want. Because, I mean, if you're realistically role-playing the character as a new character in the world rather than somebody who knows a lot about the game world and is trying to direct your character this way, then the adventure just to know about, the different ways that you can potentially control fire, that alone is a serious adventure.
No, because even as a character in the game, everybody should know that if you want to do research, you go to Sky Pass. You won't be able to do any magic while you're there, but, you go and you find your way and you figure out your way to let them research what you want to research, and then you leave and actually pursue how you're going to attain whatever you want to attain. So, especially, again, if you're chaotic, the smart thing to do, and you're cunning, is to go to Brog and do your research on the clandestine and, say, hey, yes, I follow Brog and I'm, hopefully they aren't doing any truth spells on you. But then you leave with the knowledge and you go pursue Cthulhu.
Very
No,
good.
it does make me wonder too with Skypass. Just since you mentioned that as a tangent, I often wonder what controls Skypass puts in place for study, because there's been mentioned that you can't just walk up into their library and exhume their deepest secrets about
Right.
it. So there's a vetting process that you have to go to, and certainly a level of devout, I guess, practice. Proof. Practicing what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, do they stop you from leaving? Do they say it's like, cool, well, I'm gonna go spread the word now, just mosey on out of here? Or is there, rules that you can't leave, or that you have to be accompanied by someone, or that you have to report to another temple? It'd be interesting, because obviously letting them in, letting them gain this knowledge, and then just letting them go off in the world seems like a surefire way to have problems.
Yeah, I would not expect the folks of Sky Pass to allow just anybody into their library.
Yeah.
Well,
You got to know somebody. You got to have a letter from somebody else that they know. You've got to have something that says, yeah, we can let you in and you're not going to go off and try to wreck the world.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's ways that they try to circumvent that sort of stuff. If that is the sort of pursuit of knowledge that you want to do, I would imagine you would put your valuables somewhere, maybe buried under a tree outside of town or something, and then you go in, you learn this knowledge, find a secluded, once you've learned what you need to know, and you want to escape in a way that people might not even notice or might not even know that happened until you're already gone, is that you find a secluded place, kill yourself so nobody will find your body, go through the mortality gate and escape, just run buck naked out of that place. You will have escaped. Like, if there's any, heavy barred doors and windows that you would have to pass through, this might be an easier way. Plus, once again, if going crazy is your, is one of the parts of your character's intent, then that might get you there a little faster. Maybe you'll see something on the other side that reforms you. Maybe you'll see something on the other side that just further reaffirms that this is the right way for you to go.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Theleston, where suicide really is the answer.
But I don't remember hearing anything that it was difficult to leave Sky Pass. Why?
No, not
I don't.
necessarily
I don't.
Sky Pass, but
Yeah.
the Brogging monasteries that they might have rules that you have to spend a certain amount of time there and be vetted out before they'll, A, let you get certain information, and B, let you leave with that information.
Which actually has been touched on lightly in a previous fireside. Unfortunately, I don't remember which one, but they did touch on it briefly that they didn't just let anyone could come to SkyPass. Anyone could certainly want to learn, but they didn't just let you have kind of the large unlimited access right away, which makes sense. But I think in this example, you're a dedicated person. You really want to know this. You're not gonna, not gonna walk in. Or let me rephrase that. You know it's going to be a challenge, so I'm sure you're not gonna just turn around and be like, oh well, never mind. I'm just gonna leave then. So.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect that you could take a book out of their library. I
Probably
think
not.
that's going to be a
Yeah,
lending
for
library.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a
No.
reference library. You
Yeah.
go in, you do your
Well-
thing, you leave empty-handed.
You know,
But if
I would
have
imagine they even
scribe
have.
skill. Copy that shit down.
Well, it's the old school. If I'm not mistaken, older cathedrals and monasteries and stuff would have chains on the binding of the book, so you can't actually take it too far from the actual bookcase. I would imagine a lot of that sort of stuff. And then physical other protections and stuff, such as that if you somehow sever the chain, the pages go blank until it's been reattached or something like that. I'm sure they've got a lot of safeguards. This is a lot of information that they definitely want to preserve, and they definitely want to make sure it does not, fall in the wrong hands. But for people that have been vetted and are, allowed to have that information, yeah, go nuts.
Well, and I mean, from the perspective of, I'm guessing, from the perspective of the Broggeen in SkyPass, it is their job to restore, recover, retain the history of the world. I mean, and that's the only place where it is. It's the biggest.
the
It is like
primary
the Library
place,
of Alexandria. So I mean, it is the place where you've got the history of even what was lost.
Yeah, and I'm wondering. So a good way, if there was some, you have to worry about them not, you became a monk so just so you could find certain information, and they're adverse to letting monks leave. You might be able to get yourself excommunicated, but then that raises the question of, if they excommunicate you, are you allowed to leave with all of the knowledge that's in your head?
Yeah, and how would they restrict that if so?
Take your head.
Well, hopefully, but
I'm thinking
as
that remove some knowledge.
and that's what I was thinking, because obviously, as Nero said, right, if they take your head, that doesn't guarantee you're not going to get away from theirs,
Yeah.
fresh as a peach. So
I mean,
and surely there's got to be some kind of
Hallmark.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think that's what they call it, hallmark, right? There's a hallmark that they could use to remove your knowledge.
But that's that much said. Sure, that is the one avenue, and of course there's many others. They could try to seek out their own apprenticeship, try to find that eccentric man on the, who manages to perform minor miracles, or Miracle Max, or what have you. I think the example they used was, they started with like the coin that always, flips head, right? And taking that train of item that is magical but does not require magic of its own, of the user to make it
Right.
manipulated. So they follow that train of thought, and they try to find someone who's similar, or try to find people that display these abilities, and learning from them. And
Yeah.
so I guess you don't have to go to SkyPass. I think probably the most direct way to get knowledge, and I would tend to think, short of finding a truly skilled individual that you could apprentice with that wasn't related to them, short of that, I think that's probably where you're going to find the most high level magic, or the theory of it, so that you can perform it. But again, then you run into the issue of how do you run off with it and perform it yourself.
Right. Now,
Yeah, I think I would
Obad
go
said
to-
something here
right.
about, how many people have the Brogging disappeared. And, I think about that. and this is something I thought about for a while in the game, that the ultimate form of punishment that you could exact against another player isn't killing them, it's imprisoning them in such a way that they cannot escape but are perpetually sustained. At that point, the character is, worse than dead because you can't go anywhere. You're just going to sit there constantly getting more and more mad. Maybe in your madness, you'll be able to reach out to something, outside of yourself and get access to something that'll help you escape. But at the same time, I would imagine if the Brog have designed a very nasty dungeon like this somewhere deep under Skypass, that they've put other seals and safeguards and things to try to keep whatever power contained and suppressed as much as possible. That's what I kind of think of Broggains trying to disappear somebody, is that you make sure that they can't die and come back somewhere else, and you make sure that they don't see the light of day again.
Well, I mean, oubliettes are kind of famous for that.
Yep.
And up in Sky Pass, you could dig a very deep hole to create an oubliette.
Yep.
But in the world of Theleston, everybody dies, and most everybody comes back. So you wouldn't be able to really prevent them from coming back unless you know some really pretty magical stuff. And of course, these are the guys in Sky Pass who don't practice magic.
Well,
So, yeah.
everybody dies, and there's a good potential to come back. It's not. I don't think everybody comes back.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not a guarantee.
Yeah, you have to find your way back. There's several.
You have to be
things,
you have to have not enough, temporal damage or spiritual damage to be able to get to, survive coming back. Yeah, no, it's definitely not a guarantee.
But it's also the Sky Pass is a good place because magic is less likely to occur there. Is it that the ley lines kind of go around? There's something.
Yeah, the ley lines kind of go around it but not through it, is how it was kind of described. So there's power nearby, but within the city it's actually very, very protected, and use of power is very restricted.
Yeah. I also think that most up-and-coming occultists spend a few years of their life pursuing rumors of various private collections too. That the way that collectors of rare items at the high level are aware of the inventories of their rivals in the real world, for example. Rogue copies, crude transcriptions of other volumes from memory. We used to talk about how different editions of a book might contain different tags. The point of that was to simulate the sort of third-hand noise that the magical lore of Lovecraft's fiction had, where fakes get passed along all the time, or partial copies can cause curse-like failures. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think, I think Congarai might be a better place to find information about Cthulhu more easily. But there should also be libraries other places.
And there are.
Sky Pass is the best place, probably, in terms of accumulated knowledge. But if you're going for Cthulhu, it might not be the best place and easiest place to research.
Well, no,
Right,
I'd
but
love
if you were some up and coming wannabe magician or magic practitioner, I mean, you wouldn't even necessarily know about Cthulhu. I mean,
Depends on where you
Yeah.
are. In Congarai, I would probably know. I'm not sure where
maybe, yeah.
Cthulhu is practiced. You probably wouldn't in Greyshore, because
Right.
And so it seems to me that we need again to split up these. Is it split? So there's the beast-headed gods, and then who? There's a subsect of elder gods, because the Congarai gods seem to be a subset of the Synodan gods, but we don't have a term for the non-beast-headed part of the pantheon. So I think Cthulhu, Bast, those are, you'd go to Congarai if you're. I'm not sure if Cthulhu is a part. I don't remember if Cthulhu is part of that Congarai part of the pantheon. It might be that you'd go to the whatever the native populace of Valor is called to pursue Cthulhu
I mean,
information.
the other thing is maybe Congarite gets you close, but it's really like old information that Colossians and Garavi have that you maybe won't find in an established place, but there's definitely still families or smaller groups that they don't go and talk about it, but they definitely still bear this knowledge and can teach it or
Oh.
use it. So
Same with the
Cthulhu is a great
same
old
with the,
one, so.
okay.
well, and same with the cultures that are I lost my train. Sorry. Same with the cultures that maintain a very strong oral history. I mean, there's surely a fair amount of information that is passed along that way if you can find the right people, or possibly even storytelling in and of itself is a form of magic, low-level magic that is designed to help reinforce the stories, help them pass along from generation to generation. So something else that could be gleaned, certainly, while this person is delving into their magical study.
Yeah.
Well, Cthulhu, they're saying Cthulhu is a great old one, so especially in Sky Pass, I think it would be very, 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 very difficult. I mean, that's going to be really secured information. They're going to be doing all kinds of stuff, and you're probably suspect just to be even looking that
Right.
stuff up.
Yeah.
So Cthulhu specifically, just about anywhere, since it's not an elder god, would be more difficult
Yeah.
to come by because they're trying to avoid bringing the great old ones back.
Right. I would think any inquiry, however you tried to couch it, about outer gods and great old ones would be absolutely met with some kind of stonewalled expression of we ain't going there.
And so with that, I would imagine if someone really wants to learn more and knows all of the bias and taboo that comes with it, it would be instead that they try to join with cult breakers that are seeking out these specific gods and their cults. And, at the last minute, when you guys are there surrounding that cult, getting ready to, for your final attack, you do something that alerts them, as well as taking the opportunity to betray the other cult breakers. So now you've done something to ingratiate yourself to the cult that was about to get busted up, while using the cult breakers as your means, your vector to actually locate them to begin with. So that's definitely a type of adventure, but I mean, just how somebody even comes across magic was definitely a really interesting subject, and that was kind of earlier on in the show, in the fireside that they talked about that.
Yes.
Since you mentioned cult breakers, I'm going to segue into my little mini rant that
Okay.
Snipe and Ombwa should give Verde a little bit more slack when he's throwing out terms, because they often dismiss his connotation of terms, and he's often actually kind of correct. Verde was asking what would happen if somebody in a bar or tavern mentioned that there's a cult or there's a cultist around, and they were like, oh, nobody would care because, there's all kinds of cults. But what the connotation that Verde was going for is a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. So if you're in an area where the people have that connotation of cult in their forefront, yeah, mentioning that somebody belongs to a cult is going to raise some suspicion, especially if you're thinking of it as a cult of Brog versus a different sect of Brog. And I think sect is the more neutral term that I think Snipe and Ombwa were kind of going for. There's, hundreds, if not thousands, of sects out there. cult often has, this is relatively new. They do things strangely. They don't comply to the normal way that we think of religion is often the connotation of cult. Doesn't have to be. The connotation that Snipe and Umber were going for was a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. So it's not that, they were using it incorrectly. They both had correct connotations or both are valid connotations of cult. But Verde kind of had it on point that I would expect there to be areas that if you mention there's a cult, people would think that's strange or sinister. And there could be cults of Brog that people would think are strange or sinister, even if it is an elder god. And I'd like to see some of those pop up, by the way.
Yeah, I could see, since we're talking about Brog, I could see a sect of Brog that used tools that might not be considered strictly kosher, according to the Sky Pass way of thinking, because, no magic. So,
Sure.
yeah, so there's a sect because for them, in their thinking and in their analysis and study of whatever they're doing, they're using this tool in order to find out about this. And, that bends the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that.
Which kind of plays into the lovely. There's an aspect of magic that I just kind of adore in Lovecraft and especially as it's evolving in Theleston, which is there's this wonderful hubris behind magical research or gaining magical abilities. You're elevating yourself above your common man. You're gaining control over these primal elements that that are beyond most people. But at the same time, you're flirting with madness the entire way, and it is a very human condition to believe that you can master something and push aside its negative or the negative side effects that come with it. And so there's this as you increase in your arcane power, you're at the same time more and more sure that you're pushing aside that oh, madness, that's not bothering me, I'm becoming this master of it. Or maybe they become acutely aware of it and they kind of drift off to become a hermit or something because they're aware of the issues with it. But there's just this wonderful thought that starts with curiosity that transcends into this kind of self-serving desire to learn more, combined with this hubris of assuming that you can avoid these side effects with it. Case in point would be things like sex that decide, well, yeah, okay, so they say that we shouldn't use any of this, we shouldn't do any of this, but these are tools to our advantage. It's Boromir with the One Ring. It's no, this is a tool, this is a gift, we should use this, and everyone else like, oh, hold on, buddy. I love that, especially when it comes to magic, because invariably in a world that they know it exists, it's a mystery to most people, terrifying to a good chunk of them. We know it's partly destroyed, responsible for the destruction of your world, and there's an entire group of worship that flat out says you should not do this. There's still people who are going to be like, nah, man, we got this. We're going to do this.
Yep. Well, gee, how else are we going to destroy the gods if we don't have something this powerful, right?
Exactly, right?
Right, and then it's easier to have this purer form of the Sky Pass view of Brog worship in Sky Pass because magic doesn't work so well there. So, I can imagine people leaving because, even if they have whatever magical instruments, it's not going to work very well in Sky Pass. So they leave and they start their own branch somewhere else that will allow those instruments to function. And then even just the fact that they're in that spot and they have a place, maybe they go to a place that's, the opposite of Sky Pass in terms of it, ley lines running, a lot of ley lines, a lot of ether there. And the people in Sky Pass, frown upon that. They might even know where that is. That could be possibly a good contention there, or even knowing that you came from there. Let's say that would be really super interesting. Is someone showing up in Sky Pass saying, I'm a Brog worship in Valor or somewhere, or even a Brog worshiper in Kongarai, and the monks in Sky Pass saying, yeah, we're not letting you in. You
Yeah, not you.
um.
Yeah.
So they had talked about, and I can't remember if this might have been in the Sky Pass episode 27. They had talked about screening as you go into Sky Pass, and kind of it sounded like they divest you of any magical items that you might be trying to bring in to Sky Pass. Now at the same time, they try really hard to spin Sky Pass as this insanely good area. Everybody loves people from Sky Pass. People from Sky Pass aren't going to try and hurt you. There's no contention there. They'd never try and actually. Well, not never.
It's where the synod form. Anywhere that some sort of major, religious or spiritual thing formed and happened, everybody's going to have a positive outlook of that area going forward. I mean, there's still like all this, love and hype for the Vatican. And it's like, yeah, that's just like one religion's major center or whatever.
I have no love for the Vatican. What are you
don't?
Talking about?
Well, you might.
That's my point.
But that's kind of the idea, is that there's going to be a whole lot of people that the general status quo, it's like, oh yeah, people from Sky Pass are great.
A lot of people would, but not everybody, and so you have to think about the people who wouldn't. And I know, and so some of this is, again, there's good versus evil, but there's also chaos versus order, and Sky Pass is a highly ordered place. Too ordered for people who are chaotic. So if I can imagine coming from Falkirk and trying to enter Sky Pass and them saying you have to take off your ancestor necklace and because it is emanating as magic, and you have to take off this ring, and I'm like, hell no, I'm not taking off my ancestral stuff. No, and I would be angry that you even suggested that I do such a thing. So I think there should be, they might technically be good, but that's not the only spectrum. People who are chaotic and good are going to be upset about certain things as they try and enter the ordered area of Sky Pass, and that's the difference, and that's the tension that you have with lawful good versus chaotic good. That can be just as contentious as lawful good versus lawful evil.
Well, Snipe brought that up too at the end of the fireside chat, about how being in Sky Pass could conceivably be really tense. I mean, just really tight lawful, really tight,
Yeah.
and very, at that point, then kind of tense and unfun.
Well, not just unfun. There will be people who are pissed off, and again, people who will be offended that you're telling them that they have to divest themselves of magic items that they rely on for their livelihood. I mean, it's not just going to be, oh yeah, okay, it's fine. You suggested that I take off my ancestral heirlooms, especially when those things work. This week on, well, I don't want to spoil, but like if you think of Supernatural, it's not Supernatural, it's Vampire Diaries. People in that town are wearing rings that protect them from vampires. They're wearing rings that protect them from werewolf curses. Where you have things like that actually work for something where they live, you aren't going to just be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take off my ring, or whatever magic item that you have.
Well, just at the most basic level, people just don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people, I should say. There are some who truly value that authoritarian lifestyle, and there's kudos to them. But I can see that. I mean, and I think people, especially who are coming to Sky Pass, that are going there not with the intention of actually living there or studying there, would definitely. That's probably more common a occurrence than not. I would think. The culture shock of going from Belkirk or Valier or anywhere to Sky Pass and suddenly entering this very I guess regimented, not quite the word I'm looking for, but close enough. Culture would be a bit of a shock. But then you're also stuck with the challenge of I'm standing at the gate. Behind me's a 30-day journey back home, or I go in. So at what point, what do I compromise on first? And that's obviously going to be different for different characters. So
And different cultures.
and absolutely different cultures, yeah. But
Yeah, robust criminal underworld in Sky Pass. I'm sure there's a lot of smuggling of magical things that may occur
that's
there.
kind of where I picture it is. Yeah, the thriving underground of potentially magical artifacts.
Yeah, but how do you get into Sky Pass, and how do they test for magical items coming in? That's the thing. It might be really difficult to smuggle in a city that's run by worshippers of the god of knowledge.
You have to ride a mountain goat up and down the backside of it to
Right.
get in and out and smuggle something.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I would imagine, with the hard rock underneath, it might take a while, but there's probably networks of tunnels and other things that have been built up over time that can, potentially be used. Sometimes they'll get patrolled, sometimes they'll get blocked out and then cleared out again later.
Again, when you're trying to enter a city of the god of knowledge, I think that's probably the least likely place you're going to be able to smuggle.
Well, the god may have knowledge. Doesn't necessarily mean the people.
Yeah, not only the people may not necessarily, but then the other thing is who might be on your side that's helping obfuscate your actions, allowing you to, work undetected because you've got. Was that a Sneed that would help you out with that one? To make something magical
Need would
look
definitely be involved. Yeah.
not magical for the purposes of getting through the door. I could
I would
definitely
think
see
it'd
a
be
lot
very
of that.
hard to find somebody in Sky Pass that you could actually trust.
Maybe a local would have a better chance with that, but it's definitely a visitor coming through. I would imagine there are a lot of people that are just like the cop on the corner that's selling weed or selling fake ID, stuff or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, come back this way. And it's like, we caught you. You came to the city and you totally were doing bad, and we, now you get to go to the prison of oubliettes that you will never emerge from.
Let's move away from Sky Pass for a minute. Though. I'm curious more about how magic has flourished in the rest of the world that doesn't have those controls, that doesn't have that kind of well-intentioned fear, maybe, of magic. Again, Kongarai, Felkirk, oral traditions. Shamanistic, for lack of a better term, magics, or just the people that are using it just to survive, to help their towns or villages try to eke out that living. They have someone who maybe has some skill, and that's all they apply it to. But there's a whole world out there that is got to be using it, and got to be using it a lot more freely, to achieve whatever goals they're trying to do. And they might be, again, kind of mundane goals, or they might be, the truly mustached villain, world power goal. But anyway, sorry, I just wanted to kind of pull away from Sky Pass and look at what the rest of the world might be doing.
Well, alchemy is definitely one thing that comes to mind, because that's one very practical sort of thing that I think a lot of cultures will eventually find their way to one way or another. But it isn't directly spellcasting so much as part of the ritual of this magic is the process of creating these things. And that's kind of, you know, how I think it was last week they were doing the one on alchemy. Was it last week? Where, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where they were saying about that you know, you're in creating something using alchemy, you're using magical processes. It isn't fully, you know, mundane and chemical and mechanical. Otherwise, then what you'd be doing is more of just a plain chemist sort of thing. And I would imagine that's probably one way that, you know, many parts of the world have found their way into magic, is through
Sure.
alchemy.
Alchemy is the gateway.
And exactly, and that was through chemistry, that, you know, you learn mix this with this and you get that. But if you mix this with this and say a little blessing or whatever, do a little dance, for some reason now it has this different effect. And, you know, that very well could be something that isn't necessarily understood so much as, it's like, oh yeah, you just do it that way because that's how we've always done it. And if you don't do it that way, if you don't use a quartz flask to pour the solution in, then it's gonna, you know, kill you when you drink it instead of make your voice sound really good, or whatever the purpose is. You know, whatever, it's probably gonna be something more practical than making your voice sound good. Something like I don't know, like a fertilizer or something to try to help your plants grow better. That seems a lot more practical as something that even a rural farming town, or likewise Havensport, like the people there designing docks in such a way that, you know, they're not going to get maintained very much, so they have to do the best they can. And so even though it's real crap wood that they had available, they managed to, you know, do it in these alchemic processes. That means it's, you know, it's going to last for a while, and somehow have this luck that boats aren't going to crash into it and destroy it.
Magical pressure treating.
Yeah. So, you know, I could see alchemy, but then I guess other ways, like they were talking about at the beginning of the show last time, the idea of somebody actually going through a mortality gate. You might see some things over there that just open up your mind to an entire volume of knowledge that, you know, would otherwise never ever have been possible. And the fact that you died on that hunting trip is the reason why. You know, it's like, what happened to Bill? Oh yeah, he's been spending long hours in his study, you know, poring over this knowledge and writing stories of these things that he saw. And, you know, that,
Yeah, I
that
gotta imagine your first time through
it's
a
gotta
mortality
be
gate,
pretty
you know,
crazy.
especially if you didn't have an easy job of it. You know, if you weren't lucky enough to be, oh, I died, I've read about this, I've heard about this, and I happen to be right by mortality gate, everything comes up aces, right? For most people, I imagine it's a fair struggle, and that's gotta wreck your worldview.
Well, what I love about that example, it reminds me of my the first time I logged into EverQuest. So the guy that introduced me to EverQuest is Jens Anderson, who's now over EverQuest at Daybreak, and he was the creative director of DC Universe Online.
Now he's creative director of like everything, I think.
Yeah. And so he was like, Diggs, you gotta play this EverQuest game. But at the time, before EverQuest, everybody at Activision was playing Ultima Online, and they were it's a company filled with gamers, so they're all PKing everybody. So I log into EverQuest for the first time, and as I'm loading in, I see, before I can even move, there's dialogue of this magician is casting, this wizard is casting. And I'm like, somebody's trying to kill me before I can even get in the game. So the first thing I do, I'm trying to move and run and I run off a cliff and fall into a pool and I drown. That's my first experience of EverQuest. So the first thing I did every time I leveled was level my swimming. I was obsessed with being the best swimmer I could because I was paranoid about drowning again. And so even just trying to research, how do I make sure I don't die like this again? All I wanted to do was fish. And somehow...
without the risk of death.
Yeah.
What can I find to help me fish and stay safe? I mean, that is
That is it. Yeah,
Gonna
that's
induce madness and have you obsessed with finding stuff. That's gonna change your worldview for sure. I can't
Yeah.
believe I died like that.
that's great though. Especially imagine you go through that and you see someone that is not going to make it back, like say being caught by a fetcher, right? That's got to mess you up.
Yep.
Yeah, in the fireside, when they're talking about how does an ordinary person in the world of Theleston know about magic? I mean, how do they even know that it exists? How do they have any sense that it's real, that it's a real thing, and therefore is just a part of your life? It's just an ordinary, organic element of life because it is real. How do they know that? And the four main things that they talked about in the fireside were stories. You know, the stories that you're raised with.
Mhm.
They come from your parents, your grandparents, your aunt and uncle, whatever. Stories that you hear on the street, but stories. The second one was witnessing something. So you have an experience because you saw something. You actually saw a guy on the street do something. And it looked like magic instead of being a parlor trick. But you saw something. The third one was to be at a mortality gate when somebody comes through it.
Yeah, and
So
I think
you're
that
actually witnessing them coming back from the dead. The fourth one was to actually see a night gaunt if you were anywhere in that section of town at night. Yeah,
One
to
come to
change
life.
your
Yeah.
worldview.
Yeah, I think one of my questions when I watched this a month ago or so was they seem to say that that at least in some areas that would be your first introduction is seeing a family member being taken to a mortality gate to see a family member returned.
Right.
And I think my question was, how do you know that your family member is returning?
Well, we
I don't
kind
know.
of
That's a
touched on
good
that
question.
actually back, uh, some time ago. Back, I think even before we switched over to Discord, we were talking a bit about that, and I had asked. I mean, how do they know, right? Is it a guaranteed thing? How do you handle death as a whole? You know, when you're not sure if they're going to come back, do you bury the body? Do you bother? Is there just like a monthly or couple times a year ceremony that everyone just says, okay, we're mourning the loss of these X number of people who didn't come back? But the short answer was essentially that there's no guarantee. They didn't know for sure, that they were going to come back. So it's to some degree just a hope. You go there, you hope for the best, or you wait and you pray that your family member returns. And if they don't after a reasonable period of time, they basically just move on.
So is this like the way they do a wake? So the purpose of the wake used to be back in the day when our medicine wasn't so great, and our doctor's knowledge wasn't so great, that it was possible for people to be thought to be dead and they actually wake up a couple of
Right.
days.
So the wake
several
was to
days
make
later.
sure they were actually dead.
Yeah. You're waiting to see if they might wake up. And so I can see that being an extended thing. I know that there's a Jewish tradition of this, especially, right? Nero,
Yeah,
how
sitting
many
Shiva.
days?
It's I believe a full week.
Right. It's a full, yeah. So I can imagine it being a full week of traveling to the mortality gate, the nearest one, to see if they're going to return through that. Might be a common thing. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason I asked about it originally, I mean, just as a whole, death in a world like Tellison, or death in Tellison, has got to be such an odd concept, and it's got to create a lot of strife too, because as it is, we already sit here and many people will say, well, why does this happen to this person but not me, or why did this happen to me and not them? And so now you have that to a level of, why did my neighbor's dickbag of a dad come back and my dad is still a rotting corpse under the thresher? It's where where is their faith in their gods challenged by that? And then, of course, if they do have a family member come back, how has that changed when they say, well, it was this huge struggle to come back, and gosh, life is really impermanent, so you got to be really careful? Or do they come back and say, well, shit, I died and came back, so, do whatever? I mean, how does an impermanent, a world with impermanent states of death affect its people? Because across all cultures, across all religions in our world, death is permanent. And so there might be a life after death, there might be an ascension, there's a lot of things, but this, our mortal coil, when gone, that's it. So we have, all facets of our cultures have some basis that or some commonalities that we've all kind of equally developed that are around that. But how does a world where that doesn't apply develop?
But see,
how do
that's
people grow up that way?
That's not true, because if you were Buddhist, for instance, then you might be expecting somebody to return. And in some cultures, they actually believe that people have returned. And so
Which
what
you're
happens,
right, fair point.
What happens when people do literally return? Some of them are going to be taking hits of madness. So is it always a good thing when people... I can imagine that lots of places or lots of people have the mindset of, oh, we need to keep an eye on that guy because he just returned from the dead and we don't know how he's going to act. I think that's a fascinating thing too, is it might not all even in the same town, but from culture to culture, returning from the dead might make you more suspicious than, oh, yay.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
returned.
it's not, it's kind of not normal. I mean, it is, because it happens, but at the same time, that person died. Now they're back, and like you said, are they the same person? Because as we just discussed, right, there's probably some odd transcendent moment for them, something poignant that happens to them that changes their outlook in some way. So is it the same person that comes through? It's our vets come back and they have, can become very different people just from what they've experienced. Now imagine if they died and came back, and yeah. So, and again though, where does that tie into magic? 'Cause now you have your experience with magic, your family member or a friend or just someone tertiarily comes back, so magic is real. How many people, I wonder, embark upon magic as a fascination to some degree with death? How can I make it more reliable? Snipe was just mentioning that he thinks the fixed mortality gates are probably kind of depressing because there's tons of people there hoping and praying their loved one comes back. They might not. How many people may have gotten into magic because they said, I want to make it so everyone comes back. I don't want to go through that. I don't want other people to go through that. Or is there someone who says they should never come back? No one should come back. This is wrong. So, and both of those I could see being something that would lead to madness very quickly in your efforts, because now you're trying to contend with and manipulate life and death itself. And really, what a more primal a force is there?
Yeah, and then we may need to. Verde had mentioned imbuing in chat, and that was reminding me that we might want to, at some point, start reviewing some of the skills again, because he's saying they haven't talked about imbuing much. We haven't talked about imbuing much. In fact, we haven't talked about a lot of the individual skills. But, what kinds of... I did want to touch back on SkyPass just a little bit to see if they will answer in chat. I'm curious about hallmarks for Brog worshippers in SkyPass. Would they be using, as players trying to have our characters acquire hallmarks in SkyPass, would we be selecting skills like imbuing or I don't know what other kinds of divination, things like that, or would hallmarks be a separate skill? I'm wondering about that. But moving on, what other cultures are focused on certain magical forms like Um, bone mending, I think, is one. Is it bone mending or bone? What?
Flesh mending?
There's flesh mending and bones
Yeah, there
something.
was something specific to bones.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Bone craft.
I think there was a
Bone
bone
craft. It might be bone craft. Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering. I usually think of both of those together, for healing. So are there cultures that are more focused on that than others?
Good question. Yeah. Bone carving.
I don't recall any mention of
No.
that.
Well, there bone
the far side.
carving is one, but it's different than the bone. There's a bone sculpting one too. So bone carving is like wood carving and things like that. You're just doing that. But there's a bone something one. But anyway, I'm just tossing out some. What other skills were
Oh,
you
okay.
thinking of?
So he did
Throw.
just confirm that bone craft is correct. It's using bones as a medium. Cash bones. Cash for your bones.
Cash for other people's bones, I would imagine.
But I think the answer to that though is probably along the lines, right? Because there's some probably similar paths I could see people taking magic to out where you don't have like the Nadenzian chapel where you can go get someone healed. So it's probably of greater interest to them to have some kind of flesh mending, bone, or I guess physical body focused magician. I hate that word, but practitioners. And I could see that being something maybe more prominent in Garai and at one point Kajala, and versus say Baylor.
Or Fall
Um,
Creek. That's a more natural-based culture. I could see their local shaman and healers being more oriented to using prime plane materials and yet imbued with their faith. So that would produce a magical element.
Mhm.
Because if they say the ritual, if they do something without a ritual, it has X effect. And they have proven this over and over and over. But if they do something with this prayer or dedication or something, some extra element of something approaching spellcraft, then it has this effect. And I would think that the more prominent shaman of that region would become quite well known for their healing abilities if they had that extra bit.
Because one thing that seems to be common that they said in the fireside, and that's kind of stuck with me, is that magic is ultimately a sacrifice, whether it be physical medium, sacrifice of aether and the mana around you, sacrifice of mental, constitution, things like that. But ultimately, magic has a toll that is more than just in the ritual, more than just the components. It is you are truly messing with something beyond your normal capabilities, and therefore there is a toll that has to be exacted from
Yes.
and so that's something that's and probably at the core of ultimately everything is just the fact that magic is a sacrifice, and therefore isn't is as much a reason why it is not widely used as it is.
Yeah, and that's actually leads right back to the title of the show. I mean, that's how the fireside started, was with that one of your poorer decisions in life line, I think from Snipe. But I mean, it's funny, and yet the emphasis through that entire 2-hour show was very much about the use of magic is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Whether it costs you your mind, whether it costs you in corruption, depending on how you are aligned, whether it costs you in your life force energy and then time to restore, whether it costs you your life because you burned yourself out. I mean, all of those as costs, not to mention the time it took to learn anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of the venomous sword example that they gave as you didn't know it necessarily, but the way that you killed those spiders, the fact that you killed those spiders, whatever bad juju was going on with those spiders, ended up getting imbued through a very violent and bloody ritual of killing them all into the sword itself. And so with that, it's not necessarily that you've, invested a part of yourself into it and, done this very organized and unified ritual so much as maybe these were some bad spiders, maybe some greater old one or other God created these spiders for a purpose, and you've slain them, and the magic that was sustaining them has now been collected into your sword. Or the other example that I gave is that I don't know, maybe there's just like bits of polonium or something that got embedded into your sword, so it's basically just like this, more chemically toxic blade, and whenever something gets cut with it, a little bit enters, a little flecks off and enters their system, and you bad things happen at that point. We had talked about a sword that, yeah, it's because it's killed these spiders is now venomous in one way, and it will kill anybody that it cuts. And again, whether that is a something that would look more like an imbuing process if somebody, like an outside magical observer is looking at like how that sword became the way it was and actually had somehow observed the battle, they might have a better understanding. But likewise, it could very well just have been that, whatever god it was, maybe it was, okay, whoever can slay all of these spiders, the
Right.
the ring or whatever artifact they were protecting is completely irrelevant. That's actually just a piece of junk, and really it's the act of killing them and creating that sword is why I put them there. um, that just, it creates a lot of openings and opportunities for a lot of things. And then once that power is there, I would imagine even if the sword somehow breaks, there will be other uses. There will be other ways that it can be, used for its power. The broken sword could then end up being the, something that a monastery is dedicated to, and that they actually draw some of their own power from, the power trapped within this broken sword. And with imbuing, I mean, I feel like there's also kind of more of when I just think of it in general, like across all the fantasy contexts and stuff that I've been involved and exposed with, I feel like there's kind of two parts of it. One is something that is more temporary. It is your magic arrow that is going to be awesome, but it's going to be useless after it's been shot and it's hit its mark. So it's a little bit of a lighter imbuing process than something that is like somehow slightly tethered to some other plane, and that's where it has its power. I'd imagine that's the one where you've got that like large sacrifice and lots of personal and physical and magical resources being expended to make this thing, but the end result is, let's just kind of use this as the poison sword again for an example. If someone was actually trying to create that, wherever they would be able to derive that power, they would essentially have to kind of like have it cross through the ley lines to that point and get kind of just an exposure to it, and then that is what keeps it imbued going forward, is that it's got just the taint of that plane upon it.
Well, the other thing I think that was brought up in the fireside chat was that you might have gone out on your spider killing spree and ended up with this sword that just seems quite magically imbued with some ability to just kill everything it touches, but that there's really no such thing as sourceless magic.
Right.
And and in fact, sourceless, quote unquote, magic could be far more dangerous than something you ever wanted or intended. Because sourceless magic at that point could be our old buddy Gnarly over there trying to do something. It could be setting up a bond to Great Old One or the old gods or the outer gods. It could be setting up something that you don't know anything about. And so while those of us running around in the world today, if we encountered some magical thing and didn't freak out, we might think it was really cool. And we might think, I want to take this artifact home and stick it on my mantle. Or, something like that, and have it be very cool. But in the world of Theleston, it's really going to depend on how you were raised. Because common sense might be, we need to take this to the Prester. or we need to take this to the local priest or the shaman or the diviner or somebody to find out what the hell is going on. But I don't think I want to touch this thing.
Especially because they're coming out of the Dark Ages. I mean, they're still trying to, restore the Age of Wonder before the fall. And the things that caused the fall was the worship of these great old ones and outer gods. So they're going to be trying to avoid that as much as possible. Yeah. The magic that you don't know is likely to be suspect.
Yeah, more suspect than the magic you do know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because at least you can get a grasp or an understanding of maybe, its source, its consequences, its likely traits that it follows versus it's just this random artifact that I picked up or item that's become imbued. Who knows where it is? Maybe it's, gnarly, doing his thing, or it's, it's an outer god or great old one. No idea. Which, right? Ignorance is dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the examples that they gave in the fireside about how that kind of insidious effect could work its way into the world. Yeah, those are pretty interesting and spooky. Because ignorance is a really dangerous thing.
Yes.
When it comes to magic, for sure.
When it comes to a lot of things.
I have two questions. A question about necromancy and a question about golem crafting. Are these branches of magic that could be pursued by worshiping elder gods, or are they? I mean, are there cultures that allow for that fall under elder gods, or are those specifically tied to worship of great old ones or outer gods? I'm hoping someone in chat will respond. And it's funny because, again, I know it's definitely frowned upon in Sky Pass. I have no clue where else it might be frowned upon or
well, they did make a comment
accepted.
about anything with regard to necromancy is universally not okay.
Which is odd when you consider. I mean, and maybe it's just because I would say it's odd because it's a world where people can come back from the dead, but then again, that's a different process for actually animating the dead. Maybe that's considered
So
extra
it's,
blasphemous because of the nature of the.
So
I
it's
imagine-
a pervasive no-no, although most folks might not even believe it's possible.
Well, it's one of those things that if we're talking about taking the spirit of somebody who just died and sticking it back in their body, like requiring them not to go through a mortality gate, but instead you're just pulling them back in, that I could see as being like the one approved use of something that we would call necromancy, and then everything else beyond that is, I would say, kind of a perversion of the flesh and bone, that you're taking something that is now rotting and decaying. It's not something that you can reverse the process. It's just like in real life, in our own real world, like once you're dead, the amount of things that you would need to restart and recirculate and power and get going again to take a dead person, like a fully dead, has been dead for an hour person, and make them alive again is, it's just absolutely inconceivable. And I would imagine if somebody tries to do that in Theleston, they will not only piss off the fetchers that, would probably be like, hey, we can't be having people meddling with this sort of stuff, but also that anybody who sees the act, anybody who sees the result would immediately be dismayed, disgusted, may start being driven mad by it. If you bring back the body of somebody who just died in some way where it is animate and somehow doesn't like stink and appear to be rotting, and like the flesh is all cold and clammy and nasty and everything, to try to use that body as your puppet, there you might be able to fool some folks, but there's some folks that would probably be keen to it immediately and would probably do what they can to try to expose you. Especially if the person that actually died actually comes back. It's like, whoa, that's my own body I'm talking to. But why?
Yeah. Well, and it definitely
Right, so
seems like
that's a
on
fine distinction that the guys have said here. There's no elder god that will grant necromantic powers that I'm aware of. Though now that I think about it, there might have been one at one time, and thus there may be a lost god.
Mm-hmm.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
storytelling confirmed, but we know at least that universally it seems like this is the realm of anime, and you do not tread on anime's toes.
Right.
Well, it makes sense, right? If anime is the one that calls you home and sends you back, kicks you out, and you get back through a mortality gate, then that's okay. But somebody rezzing your old body, yeah, I could see where that would be an encroachment on her turf.
It maybe, though I will posit the idea of what does it matter with the old body? They don't come back to their old body; they get granted a new body. So what the hell?
Right.
I mean, aside from the obvious moral and ethical questions about it, though, but purely from just kind of intellectual standpoint, who cares what you do with the old body? If you can make it worth usable, then you should, right?
I don't know. I think that's a fair question. I mean, does a dead body give some ether back to the world
I think
that
the
can
question,
be recycled or
I
something?
think the question may be what is animating that dead body then?
That's a good question.
Um,
Steampunk engine.
well, I mean, if it's granted by a goo or right, wow, what was now I can't because I'm thinking of too many things. What was the Lovecraft story where the people are coming through and the aliens are coming through and end up taking the guy's head and taking it back to outer space. I forget the name of that one.
Oh,
But
I don't know.
you know, when you have aliens coming through and inhabiting these necromantic rezzed bodies, that's not a good thing to have. I know he came back through the mortality gate, so what's inhabiting that heat?
Right.
You know, that could be the thing on the door. Was it the thing on the doorstep? No, the thing on the doorstep was possession. I mean, it's one thing to think about, but it's a different story that I'm thinking, not the thing on the doorstep. I'll have to try and come up with that other one I was thinking of. But yeah, that could be the problem there. But that does mention a good thing that I was gonna again about Sky Pass. I think they were saying that the Brogue monks might use cadavers for their to practice their medical skills on because it's no longer being inhabited by soul. You don't have to worry about that. So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's tons of folks in various parts of the world and various cultures that have their own rites and rituals and stuff they do with bodies they find. Maybe they bury them, maybe they burn them, maybe they put it out on a slab so that the animals can pick the bones dry and eat the organs and everything, so there isn't any rotting matter left behind, and then the bones that are left they use for other ritual purposes. Yeah, and then with that, it could even be a more specialized thing that, like, maybe something made of your parts of your old body somehow give you more power, or otherwise the inverse, parts of your old body can be used against you in some sort of malign way. That's kind of why I like the barber surgeons back in the day, and we just actually saw a really informative talk yesterday at the Renaissance Fair about this. Why they would give all of your body parts and anything they take from your body back to you is because otherwise, the potential for witchcraft. So, these things can't be used against you if you have disposed of them in the proper way. So I can imagine there's maybe a little bit of that whether or not there's anything actually to it or if it's just superstition, it's like, showing somebody their old eyes or something from their last corpse. It's like, I'm going to drive you mad by making you look into your own eyes. And, maybe there's some power to that. Maybe there isn't.
Neuro, you have an interesting mind.
But yeah, that's I could just see so much because the body doesn't just disappear. It's it's not like an MMO where when you revive, your body just fades from where it was in the world. It's there. It's still there. Something has to be done. Someone has to deal with it. Somebody's going to cross it, and it's going to stink real bad if it hasn't been properly taken care of.
You guys are funny.
The Whisper in the Darkness, I think, is the story I was thinking of.
Oh, okay. There's a fair number of stories of his that I have not read, so I'll chalk that one on the list. And
What time are we at?
We're
21.
at,
Maybe
yeah.
we want to wrap up at that. I mean, I'm happy to keep going.
but you guys
Till
can
the
keep
top
going.
of the arrow.
Unfortunately, as always,
Okay.
my
Yeah,
time
we
is
can.
a little short.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
should
can wrap
probably be wrapping it up here. So definitely a lot of stuff that we didn't talk about, but I'm sure will come up in further conversations. And of course, once we actually get to the point of doing live gameplay on the channel here, I'm sure a lot of that stuff is going to start coming up in various interesting ways.
Right. So I'd like to ask more detail about that because I think it is.
I think Dig's cut out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's see if his internet recovers. I was thinking for a second, like, oh no, did Steam start downloading something? No, everybody else is moving. I do like the look that it paused him on there.
I know. I'm looking at that too. I'm like, I should screenshot that and assign that to him as a.
Poor Diggs.
And it throws everybody's cameras off here, so maybe we should have just finished a couple minutes ago. Let's see if he can come back in here and finish the statement. No, it looks like his internet is dead.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry.
anyway, we were talking about the idea of doing the live session, so Omboss Snipe Verde, you guys would know more about that. I guess I was wondering about how close are we to actually being able to like sit down and play the game in some capacity.
Getting close, from what I understand.
Seems like it. I know Snipe's been working on a lot of the. We know it needed to be created, but we haven't done it yet, or weren't 100% sure how we wanted to do it yet, sort of thing. So, the combat stances and what moves you have, the way that you actually conduct combat and expend your stamina and stuff, the madness and like the temporary and permanent effects of madness. So you get the one form of card that it gives you some of the characteristics, and if you don't do something to clear and remedy it, it'll turn from a fear into a phobia, I guess. And then once it's become a phobia, it's more or less permanent on your character. There might be some exquisitely difficult way that exists to remove a phobia in such a way, but Terrors and Dreads, that's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that mechanic.
So while the cameras are all thrown off here, maybe this would probably be a good time to wrap up. But yeah, we'll keep you folks posted, and once we start getting close to actually doing gameplay, it will be very heavily announced everywhere.
Says we're really close.
Really
There's still
close.
Ton of lists of stuff that needs
Cool.
to get finished out too. So anyway, we can get a game started behind those lists before the goals are complete. So, yeah, good job, Verde.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Cool deal. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap us up. So thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Diggs, don't know what happened to your internet there, but see you later. And then, yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. And then December might be an interesting month because I know a lot of people are going to be out for a lot of the times we would normally do the show. So we'll keep you folks posted on our schedule with that, probably in the next couple of weeks. So till then, see y'all
Good work.
later.
See y'all later. Thank you.
Ah.